Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a couple were married for 3 years after a year of dating. Initially, their relationship was blissful, despite their differing social habits. Opie trusted him implicitly until one shocking day. A friend exposed her infidelity at a hotel. The betrayal shattered him, leading to a public humiliation of him and their eventual divorce. Now let's get into the story. My name is Lucas. My ex-wife Aria and I were married for 3 years before we went our separate ways. Aria and I lived in the same town, but I did not know her until I was 25. Even with that, we didn't start dating until 4 years ago. We dated for a year, and we married for 3 years. I know this might sound simple, but meeting Aria was love at first sight. I liked her the instant I met her, and I had this conviction that she would be the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. She was intelligent, hardworking, and pretty, and I felt we were a match made in heaven. Even though she gave me a tough time before we dated, I didn't mind waiting for her until she was mine. Fast forward to after we got married. I was literally the happiest man on earth. Although I did not express myself so much, I was glad we were finally married. Everything was blissful for the first 2 years and some months of our marriage. We enjoyed each other's company and literally did everything together. For a long time, I had been hoping to find a woman who would love me wholeheartedly, and when Aria came into my life, I was relieved. While we were married, Aria and I didn't have so many issues, and also we knew it was very normal for us to butt heads from time to time, and we understood that. We tried as much as possible to settle whatever issue we had before. Got to the extent of keeping malice with each other. Aria was someone who loved to hang out and party with her friends, and I was someone who loved to stay home and watch television. I barely went out except it was extremely important. In fact, I would prefer to cancel on my friends and stay at home to rest or do something for myself. For once, I never stopped Aria from doing her thing. I supported her and allowed her to go out with her friends as much as she wanted during weekdays, and then on weekends, we would spend quality time together at home. The reason I never had issues with her always going out with her friends was because I trusted her and I didn't expect that she would do anything to hurt me or even cheat on me. I also kept to my promise and didn't do anything that would hurt Aria. Even before we married, I stopped talking to a couple of girls I used to. Not because they were bad people, but because hanging around them always would lead me to temptation. Also, Aria told me about her ex-boyfriend and how she was hurt and heartbroken when she found out he was cheating on her with multiple partners. And I didn't want to cause her that kind of pain again. This was why she didn't say yes to me the first few times I asked her out. She claimed she was still deeply hurt and needed to be sure she had healed properly before entering another relationship. I had also been hurt in my previous relationship, but that was a very long time ago, so I could relate to her feelings, and we assured each other that we would never cheat or do anything that would cause us pain. We agreed to not have kids yet because we wanted to spend time with ourselves and ensure that we were not holding ourselves back, so our kids would enjoy the full love of their parents. Things were fine between us, and even as Aria continued to go out, I never suspected anything off. Nothing changed about her. She still acted, dressed, took care of me, and did her wifely duties. So I was so shocked one day when I received a call from a friend of mine to come and take my wife. This friend of mine who called was a hotel manager in a very popular tourist hotel in our town. We lived in a very small town, so almost everyone young and old knew the hotel. When he called me to come and get my wife from the hotel, I was shocked because that wasn't where Aria told me she was going. She told me she was hanging out with her other girlfriends at one of their friends' family restaurants. I even dropped her there myself. At first, I tried to explain to him that he was mistaken and might have been someone who looked like Aria, but he insisted that she was the one and that I should come over. The distance from the restaurant where I dropped Aria was almost a 45-minute drive to the hotel, meaning she left immediately after I dropped her there. Confused and curious to find out what was happening, I drove to the hotel and found Arya there. She was with an employee of the hotel, and the police were already involved. When I asked them to explain what was going on, I was impressed. Informed that she was trespassing and that the employee I saw her with promised to give her a free room. They planned to spend hours together, but somehow they were caught. I was so surprised and disappointed at the same time. It felt like a dream or a prank. I wanted to say something like, "We were only pulling your legs," but when that didn't happen, it struck me that Arya had been cheating on me the whole while. In addition, the employee confessed that it wasn't the first time they did so, and it had been going on for weeks. Meanwhile, while the employee confessed, the Arya was already on her knees, begging me not to listen to them, that she was being framed. I knew she was lying because she wasn't kidnapped to the hotel. She went there by herself to sleep with the employee. Since the manager was my friend, he wanted to let me know before he pressed charges. I was so embarrassed and heartbroken, and I even encouraged him to press charges so he could deal with the Arya as he wanted. Arya was shocked when she heard my response, and her tears intensified. She begged me to talk to my friend, but my mind was made up. When she saw that I wasn't begging my friend, she begged me to take her home. I didn't say anything to her, and I watched as she cried and begged. Her affair partner was fired on the spot, and they were both arrested. To humiliate her more, I recorded her and her affair partner as they were being arrested, and after they were taken away, I posted it online. I also posted and announced on our local town's Facebook group that she was cheating on me and having an affair at a hotel with an employee. Most people in the group knew us, and that's how the news got to everyone. By the time she was bailed by her parents, she and her affair partner were the talk of town, and they faced a lot of ridicule. It was very shameful that even her close friends deserted her. It was hilarious when she tried to come home and beg me. She said she couldn't explain what pushed her to cheat on me and that she was so sorry. She claimed she still loved me and wanted us to work out, but I told her it wasn't possible. Even after she took her things out of my house and we divorced, she kept begging and crying. She even asked her best friend to try and talk to me. But I warned her and asked her to leave my house. It's been 1 year since it happened, but it still feels like yesterday. I'm having a tough time moving on, but I know that one day this will be a long-forgotten history. As for her affair partner, I don't know what happened to him, but I do know Arya did not end up with him. Today's second story. In this story, Opie and his wife met in graduate school, married, and built a life together with children and a home. He survived throat cancer but discovered his wife's infidelity with their neighbor during his treatment. Confronting them publicly, he gathered evidence, leading to divorces for both couples. Now he contemplates his future, unsure whether to keep the house or move on for the sake of his kids. Now let's get into the story. I, 39 male, met my wife, 37 female, while we were both in graduate school. I had a work-study as a teacher's aide, and she was in one of the classes that I was helping with. Right away I could sense there was a connection between us. She would consistently stay late after class to ask questions, and I was getting a strong vibe from her, so I offered private tutoring. From there, the rest was history. We officially started dating after that semester, so there wouldn't be any conflict of interest, and we got married 2 years after we graduated. We spent the past 15 years focusing on our careers and our family. We have beautiful daughters together, and we actually just bought our first house. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with throat cancer, and I had to go through some treatments to help it. It was a scary time for our family. I was very focused on the cancer, and admittedly not much else. I realized that was a problem, but I had practically been handed a death notice, and I was anxious about it. I underwent surgery and chemo to make sure it was completely gone. The good news is, I'm all clear and have a positive prognosis moving forward. The bad news is, I feel like I have to start my life over from scratch because my wife cheated on me with our neighbor. The total time that I was in chemo was about 6 months. During that time, I lost a lot of weight, I was sick all the time, and I ended up having to shave my hair off entirely because it was falling out. I know it sounds awful to say, because going through something like this is so challenging, but I couldn't stand looking at myself in the mirror. Before my cancer, I spent a lot of time at the gym. I ate healthy, and I took good care of myself. I never thought I was the most attractive guy in the world, but I was happy and confident with myself. Seeing myself after the chemo was a big shock, and it's still something that I'm working to come back from. About a month ago, I really started to notice there was something going on with my wife. After getting the positive prognosis, all I wanted to do was spend time with my family and celebrate my life. However, my wife couldn't seem to make time for that. She always had some excuse to stay behind when I wanted to go to the movies or the park with the kids. I didn't let it get to me because I had this newfound sense of freedom in my life. I just wanted to spend time with my kids while I was on Earth. I was really cherishing life at that point. One evening over dinner, I suggested that all of us go to an amusement park when it opened up the following week. The kids were obviously excited about the news, but my wife just rolled her eyes and said that she wasn't interested in going. I questioned it because I wanted to spend time with my family. She told me that she had never been a fan of amusement parks, and she would rather just take the time alone at home to relax and read a book. I didn't want to start an argument, but I was a little annoyed with her. I hadn't spent months thinking I was going to die, and when I was finally okay, she didn't want anything to do with me. I ended up going to the park with my kids, and we had a wonderful time. However, toward the end of the day, my youngest daughter fell and hurt her ankle. It was swelling up right away, and I thought that it might have been broken, so I took her to the emergency room. I called my wife several times, and she didn't answer once. It didn't end up being anything serious, but they gave her a brace to keep on it for a couple of weeks, and we went home. When I got back, my wife was just hopping out of the shower. Right away, I asked her why she wasn't answering the phone when I was calling her. She told me that she had fallen asleep reading. Honestly, I didn't believe that for 1 second. Had she truly just taken a nap, she would have heard the phone ringing when I called her 5 times. With how everything else had been, I couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to her not answering. Later that night, when the kids were asleep, I outright asked her about it. I asked her if there was anything wrong in our relationship so we could try to fix it. She told me that I was imagining things and that she just wanted some time to herself. She ended the conversation after that and went asleep. All I was thinking about was how distant she had been lately. Once I heard her snoring beside me, I reached over and grabbed her phone. I needed to see if I really was just imagining things. I looked through her pictures and her apps, and I didn't find anything. But when I went through her messages, I found some concerning information. I saw our next-door neighbor at the top of her message list, which struck me as odd. So I clicked on it, and it told me everything I needed to know. He had messaged her a couple of months before about how he saw her in our hot tub. It was honestly kind of creepy how he worded it, but my wife was apparently flattered. He said that he felt like she was putting on a show for him, and he was interested in her. Their messages progressed from there, and they made a plan to get together to see if they're feeling better. Could go anywhere. It was clear from the messages that followed that they were in an intimate relationship with each other. What was even more disturbing about it was that he was married and he had 3 children of his own. Both of them were just throwing away their marriages. I screamed, recorded the messages, and sent myself the recording so I would have it for my own evidence. Then I rolled over and tried to figure out what I was going to do. We lived in a little cul-de-sac and everybody was pretty close. It wasn't unusual for one of us to throw a party or invite everyone over for dinner. So I went to all of my neighbors and invited them over for dinner to celebrate my recent cancer-free diagnosis. They were all ecstatic to go and happy with my good news. The day of the dinner came, and my wife and I were busy preparing everything for our guests. Everyone came and we mingled, drank some wine, and had a good time before dinner was served. During dinner, as the conversation lulled, that the neighbor that my wife was sleeping with told me that I was lucky to get to spend so much more time with my family. He then complimented my wife on the delicious food and made a joke about how I was a lucky man. I took that as the prime opportunity to call him out and say that he would know. He pretended to be confused, but I could see in his eyes that he was worried about where I was going. I told him that I knew he was sleeping with my wife. My wife dropped her fork on the plate and nearly spit up her wine. She told me that I was out of line for even suggesting that. Then I pulled out my phone and showed her the evidence that I had. Everyone else around the table was silent, but I could see that they were very interested in what I was saying. I had no doubt in my mind they would go home and talk more about it. I went into my office to grab the divorce papers I had prepared. I brought them back into the dining room and gave them to my wife. All the while, my neighbor's wife was asking him if it was true, and he was fervently denying it. I sent her the evidence hoping that it would convince her that he was lying. Not long after that, everybody excused themselves from dinner because it was extremely awkward. My wife was trying to beg me not to do anything drastic. She didn't want me to leave, but there wasn't a chance in hell that I was going to stay. I was curious though, so I asked her why she did it. She told me that she wasn't attracted to me anymore after the chemo. If there had been any chance that I was going to give our relationship another try, it was done after that. I told my wife that I wanted her to get a hotel for the night because I needed to be away from her, and she agreed to do that. During the night, I could hear my neighbor arguing and his wife was throwing his things out of the house. I ended up divorcing my wife and keeping her house. I'm still trying to decide what I want to do with it. I don't know if I want to sell it and move somewhere else, or if I want to try and keep some semblance of normalcy for my kids. My neighbors also got divorced. Forced. Anytime I ran into my neighbor on the street, he looked like he wanted to kill me, but his wife was thankful that I told her because she didn't want to be with a cheater either. Today's third story. In this story, OP divorces his wife after discovering her infidelity with his close college friend. Despite his loyalty, she constantly accused him of cheating, while she was the one being unfaithful. He exposed their affair by sending photos to family and friends. Disillusioned by marriage, he vows never to remarry, feeling betrayed by his ex-wife and those who knew but stayed silent. Now let's get into the story. I, 28 male, recently divorced my ex-wife, 25 female, after 2 years of marriage. The first time I met my wife was in college. I was ahead of her in class, and shortly after we became friends, I graduated. But my wife and I kept in touch. Fortunately, things went smoothly for me, and I was able to get a good-paying job months after I graduated from college. By this time, my wife and I had gotten closer, and occasionally, I would support her financially, so she could take care of things she needed to. Even though we were not dating, we got intimate, and it was more of a friends with benefits relationship. But as time passed, I fell in love with her, and we were officially dating in no time. While we dated, our relationship had a lot of ups and downs, and I should have considered this a red flag, but because I was deeply in love with her, I thought my influence would rub off on her, and she would change with time. I wasn't the kind of boyfriend who always fought or argued, but my wife was. She argued about everything, including the ones that should not have led to an argument. She was more of a defensive person and was never wrong, even though she was always at fault. Eventually, we dated for 2 years after breaking up a couple of times, and later on, we married. Aside from her defensive nature and inability to control her anger, my wife was a good person. She took care of me, satisfied my needs, and took care of our home too. She was also good with money management, which was the one skill I didn't have. In the first year of our marriage, something happened that almost shattered our marriage. So there was this female colleague of mine that I was close to. We used to have lunch together, and most times, I would drop her at her home after work, but my wife never liked this idea. She knew my colleague well, and no matter how I tried to explain to her that there was nothing between my colleague and me, she wouldn't listen. One day after work, I offered to do a little bit of work, drop a few of my colleagues at the bus station like I usually did, and this female friend of mine opted to sit in front with me. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my wife jumped out from where she was hiding and assaulted my female colleague. She created a terrible scene at my workplace, and I was almost fired because of her actions. My wife badly injured my female colleague, and she even had her hair pulled out. Ultimately, I had to pay all the hospital bills and beg my colleague not to press charges. That was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, and even after I went home to confront my wife, she showed no remorse. She claimed she knew I was cheating on her and called me all kinds of names. I didn't understand where all that was coming from because I had never cheated on her, not even when we were dating. I tried my best to remain faithful, but at the slightest opportunity she had, she would accuse me of cheating on her. It didn't just end there. She invaded my privacy all the time. I would often wake up to see her going through my phone, and if I yelled at her, she would hand me her phone and say I could go through it too. For 2 years, I tolerated all that, thinking that my wife acted that way because she was insecure and didn't want another woman to snatch me from her because she loved me so much. I didn't know she had been steadily cheating on me and fooling me the whole time. Also, when she handed me her phone so I could go through it, I didn't go through it because I believed she had nothing to hide. Meanwhile, she had skeletons in her closet. The kind of work I did included traveling from time to meet with my clients, and each time I announced to my wife that I would be traveling soon, it always led to a fight. The main reason it always led to a fight was because my wife claimed I barely spent time with her, and she didn't like that I had to travel all the time. So the last time I traveled, this was before I discovered how much of a hypocrite she was. I wrapped up what I had to do with my client a day earlier, and I decided to go home and surprise my wife since she wasn't so happy that I traveled. When I got home, the house was quiet, but I noticed a pair of sneakers in my living room that wasn't mine, and as I walked down the corridor, I saw a shirt just outside her bedroom door. Our bedroom was slightly shut, and as I opened to see what was going on, I saw my wife and my closest college friend in bed together. They were both naked and all cuddled up, and they were both deeply asleep and snoring, indicating that they just did it. Geez, I was so shocked and heartbroken, and I could not believe that my wife, who accused me several times of cheating on her when I was innocent, was actually cheating on me with my friend. At that moment, I wanted to hit the hell out of them, but I realized that doing that would only add salt to the injury. So I took out my phone and took several pictures of them and left the house. While they slept, I sent their pictures to my wife's family WhatsApp group chat and sent them to our close circle of friends and even the people who knew my college friend. By the time they woke up, almost everyone I knew, and they knew had their pictures, and they sent them a lot of angry messages. Shortly after my wife realized what was happening, she called me to ask if I had received any pictures from any number, and I told her I gave her up that evening to take her things and leave my house. When I said that, she knew I was the one, and instead of being all defensive like I expected her to be, she started begging me on the phone. She said it wasn't what I thought, and that she could not explain how it happened, but I didn't fall for anything she said. After I sent my friends the pictures, some of them began to tell me they knew about my wife's infidelity. I was so shocked that some of my friends knew my wife and friend were cheating on me, but they never said anything. I was so angry, and I blocked them and cut them off completely. As for my wife, she begged me to not make any decision that would destroy our marriage, despite destroying it with her infidelity. I was already sick of her and her manipulation and didn't think twice before divorcing her. Someone here mentioned it before, and I'd love to reiterate that some women are not worth the sacrifices men make for them. It's still difficult to believe that while I was trying my best to be a good husband to her, my wife had been cheating on me from the first year of our marriage, and I never suspected anything. She went as far as painting me as the bad guy all the time. Meanwhile, she was having an affair right under my nose with my friend. Speaking of him, I cut ties with him, and as I share this story, I consider him dead to me, including my friends that watched as my wife cheated on me, but never said anything. I have made up my mind to never marry again. Marriage is not worth all the stress and drama, and it's better to be a single and free man than to be married to a manipulator and sick cheater.